the battle when we go out and do depending on
NASA undertook a test yesterday to see how its Orion spacecraft would fare if its parachutes failed to deploy. Scientists disabled 2 of the spacecraft's 11 chutes, and the test was ultimately a success, with Orion landing safely on the ground. Orion was built to someday carry astronauts to the moon and beyond. Joining us now is Professor of Astronomy and Physics at York University, Paul Delaney. Always nice to see you.
Good morning.
Tell us more about Orion and what it is.
Well, Orion is arguably the replacement to the space shuttle. You might remember that from 4 years ago. 2011 is when the last shuttle flight was. The US set about replacing the shuttle so that they could take astronauts into and out of Earth orbit and hopefully beyond to the moon, Mars, and so on. At this point in time, the Orion capsule, which looks a little bit like an Apollo capsule on steroids, it's much larger, much more capable, but it's the same basic design, will not fly with humans, though, until about 2021, if you believe that date. And that means there will be a 10-year hiatus between shuttle and Orion. But that's what it is. It is the US replacement to go back into space with people.
So during this test, 2 parachutes failed to open, yet NASA is still saying this was successful.
Absolutely.
Why?
It was a successful failure.
Successful failure.
That's right. It was all deliberately designed. They basically took an Orion capsule up to about 10 kilometers, threw it out of the aircraft, let it plummet towards the Earth, simulating re-entry with people on board. So the whole weight of the vehicle was as it would normally be during re-entry. And then, as you say, there are a series of 11 parachutes that normally deploy and bring Orion safely to the ground, very much like the Apollo splashdowns from 40 years ago. But obviously, not all parachutes are always going to deploy. So NASA wants to know the tolerances of their system. How overbuilt, if you will, is the margin of error for the parachutes? And so they deliberately got rid of one of the pilot chutes and one of the main drag chutes. So there are 3 which normally bring it down nice and safely to the ground. They deliberately disabled one of those and wanted to know, would the capsule come down safely with just 2 main chutes deployed? They expected it would. All of their theories said, yes, it's okay, but you wanted to know. And it did. It landed within tolerances, no major damage to the vehicle, saying to NASA, if one of the 3 main chutes doesn't deploy during re-entry, we can still get the astronauts safely to the ground.
So they were able to glean a lot of information from these tests.
Yeah.
And these aren't just your average skydiving parachutes, are they, Paul?
No, these are very high-tech parachutes. I mean, the whole idea of parachute descent is one that the US has utilized since the 60s. You go all the way back through most of the moon landing run-ups. They're all parachute deploy, landing in the ocean. So the technology is quite mature, but obviously we're now talking about heavier capsules. So that means the guidelines have to be much stronger. The parachutes themselves are being deployed at very, very high velocities. And so you've got to make sure they don't tear and rip. And so yes, there is a whole industry associated with parachute technology to make sure you can bring this sort of weight to the ground safely.
Absolutely.
And, you and I are on board. I mean,
well, this is the thing, and that's what I was going to say. You know, if there are humans then involved, you've got to make sure that there's a certain weight that can be tolerated.
That's exactly right. You want to hit the ground at something like 10, 15, most 20 kilometers per hour. And even then, that's a bit of a job, but you'll survive that quite handily. Yesterday, it was a little harder than that because there was only 2 parachutes, but still within tolerance.
Paul, thank you so much.
You're welcome.